Have you ever wondered what the Beastmen would look like if they lived under the sea? Well, wonder no longer and bask in the glory of the Fishmen. These are a new kind of faction added in the latest mod from the OVN team. Let's take a look and find out just how they work. First things first, this is not a traditional faction you can choose to play as from Faction Select. So how do you get them in the campaign? Well, any faction can make use of their units similar to the Ogre Kingdoms. However, you'll first need to own a coastal settlement in the Old World, and if you aren't sure what's classed as the Old World, it's generally the upper middle area of the map from Norska to the Border Princes and the Dwarves. Once you have a settlement, you'll need a bit of luck for the secluded fishing village unusual location to show up, and secondly, once it's appeared, you'll need to wait for an event that gives you the option to recruit from one of 3 sets of units in exchange for gold. If you choose any of these options, you'll then be able to recruit them from the Fishmen Mercenaries menu, anywhere you're able to use regular Regiments of Renown recruitment. As for units you can recruit, first up we have the Abyssal Acolytes, and these are pretty bog standard caster heroes with no real melee prowess to speak of. Oh, and just a note, even though they work like heroes with proper spells, they have no skills, so what you see is what you get. They come with a mix of the laws of shadows and deeps, bringing a ton of damage to their army. Honestly, there isn't much to say about them other than keep them at the back and casting as much as possible. As I said, it's mainly damage focused, so place spells wisely to maximize their damage, whilst minimizing friendly fire as much as you can. They also don't even get a mount, so keep an eye out for flankers to avoid letting them get locked down. Moving over to the rest of the monsters, first up we have the Feral Weird Clams, and these are a kind of frontlines tanking monster. They still come with decent armor piercing damage and a bonus versus infantry, but the low attack does limit their output, especially against anything with halfway decent defense. Their armor, missile resistance, and slightly better defense makes them a lot better at eating damage than dealing it. That said, they don't have the largest HP pool or the smallest hitbox, so against anything with high armor piercing, it will add up quick. Combine this with their very low leadership and they can break in moments if you send them to battle the wrong thing. I see these being strong in a relatively early army, focusing on backline's power that needs something to beef up the front lines. They may not bring that much value in the sense of what you see in the post-battle menu, but if they can hold enemies back that much longer, it's well worth it. Just be cautious of their girth blocking line of sight, so maybe stick with ranged units that have an arc. Moving over to the Menfish, and these are most similar to the Trolls, but bring a lot of changes that make them quite a bit better. First of all, they drop a little speed, but gain nearly double the leadership, 50% more entities, loads more HP and damage alongside a little bit more defense. All of this doesn't actually change how I would recommend using them, and that's to beef up any front lines that you have. Similar to the Clams, they're bringing a little more defense than attack, but with how close these stats are, you can really rely on them to do a bit of both. The armor piercing damage will do well against pretty much anything you put them against, just be conscious of how much damage is coming back their way with their lower armor. Especially against ranged, they can quickly be picked apart, even with that 15% missile resistance. I'd suggest swapping roles from the Clams to have the infantry protect these guys, whilst they deal their damage from relative safety. With the high leadership, they'll actually stick around for quite a while, just try not to let them get picked apart and be ready to pull them out even if they're still feeling confident. Next we have the Abyssal Giants, and behold, the best giant in the game. If you've seen any other video where I mention giants, you may recall I don't rate them too highly, due to the fact that peasant archers are pretty much a hard counter. This has the exact same stat card as regular giants, but comes with 35% missile resistance, so is marginally less hard countered. Is it a doom stackable unit with no possible counters? No, not even close. Is it better than any other giant? Yeah. So use it like any other giant, and that means moving it into the front lines provided you clear the area of ranged troops first. Just because they have more defense doesn't mean you should let them get shot at for free. Giants are actually really great against both infantry and larger entities, even being able to take on lords and heroes. As long as they're not getting poked full of 1,000 holes, they can do great work pretty much anywhere in melee, so just get them involved and reap the benefits. And lastly, Word Clam Riders. Coming from the Feral version, we're gaining a nice boost to leadership, HP, both melee stats, and damage. It's honestly not as large bump as you might expect, so rather than totally changing the unit, it more so tweaks them to be just a little bit better. They're probably still best used on the front lines, especially with the improved defense and leadership. They can eat an incredible amount of damage and stand firm to give whatever else you have in your army time to work, whether that's high damage infantry or some arced ranged units. Honestly, with the moderate speed, they can also work as a kind of slow moving cav, but I'd only attempt this versus slower armies to make sure they don't get caught out and dealt with before they can have any impact. Now to wrap up with my final thoughts on the mod. First of all, this is obviously a much smaller mod from the OVN team than you'd usually expect. It's not its own faction and is just a bunch of units for everyone else to use. Honestly, that fact alone has made it pretty hard to talk about their units, as it all really depends who you're playing as. If you're the Vampire Coast, then you'll use the Menfish a lot different than if you're playing as the Greenskins or the Empire. None of these units are anything crazy, and are also decent versions of certain archetypes of units. This makes them very easy to slot into pretty much any faction in the game. If they were their own faction, these would be pretty safe and boring units, but for their purpose, it fits perfectly. It's similar to the units everyone can use from the Ogres. They may not be the most exciting, but you can always find a place for them if you want to use them. The way you can make use of them is fairly simple but works well enough, as long as you get lucky. I almost wish they were more like the Ogre Kingdoms, where you would see them sailing around the seas and can recruit a few units whilst they're nearby or in port, but I imagine that would be significantly more work to implement. This is one of those mods that, as long as it doesn't cause any conflicts, I can't think of a reason to not install it and have it on all the time. It simply adds some optional units to a certain area of the map. If you don't want them, you can destroy the building for a fun little battle against some unique units and go on with your campaign. The units are all usable depending on your faction and stage of the game. So all in all, it's a great time, and if you want to give it a go, I'll link it down below. But that's everything I have on the OVN Fishmen mod for Total War Warhammer 3. Let me know what you think of the mod, as well as any others you'd like me to take a look at in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and if you want more Warhammer 3 mod videos, then check out this one all about another set of fish units for the Vampire Coast.